Hey there everybody, it's Nathan Cool with nathancoolphoto.com, and in this tutorial I want to show how you can get by faking a tilt shift without using a tilt shift lens. Now if you're wondering what I'm talking about, here's the example. This is a very large grand entrance, and just shooting it straight on would have not included the chandelier at the top, some of those beams, and other features. Now I'm going to show what this would have looked like without doing this trick of a tilt shift lens, what then all the steps were to go through this, through the editing process to get this to where everything is vertical, but yet it looks like we used a tilt shift without losing any of the composition at all. Now there's some shortcuts. You may have seen other tutorials where you shoot really wide, you put up your camera or shoot it down, and then you play around with verticals and you have to crop things down. I'm not going to have to do any of that. We're going to do something using some Photoshop techniques to be able to then get the correct geometric composition. Now, one of the first things you might think of is like, well, why don't I just use a tilt shift lens? Well, if you've ever shopped for one, you know that they're very expensive lenses. They typically don't have autofocus. You would maybe get by with manual focus, and it used to be back in the old days before we had digital photography, this is the way that you needed to do it. Now you might be still a purist, and I still respect that. If you feel that tilt shift lenses are the only way to go, then you can stop this video and probably move on to something else, but this will show a less expensive way to do it. And if, for instance, even the example that I'm showing today, this was done for a $2.4 million house. But even then, the time on site was constrained. Just to get one shot of the grand entrance with this tilt shift wasn't worth it. There was about 40 other pictures of great selling features throughout the property that we wanted to capture. And so once again, I used my standard Tokina 16-28 f2.8 lens, just like I show throughout all of my books in my real estate photography series, which, by the way, you won't need any of those books today to be able to go through this particular example. But if you are interested and haven't seen those yet, there is a link to my series in the description for this video. But anyways, let's go through all the steps that it took to compose that particular shot so that we could use a fake tilt shift, and then what the editing steps are to make it happen. You ready to see how this is done? Let's get started. Here is a shot of what it would have looked like if we wouldn't have gone with the fake tilt shift. Now I'm showing a lot of the floor here, and I'm up fairly high also to be able to capture this shot. In fact, I'm up at eye level with the camera, but it's still not enough to get up into that grand entrance and show the chandelier and some of the other beams. So what we're going to do is something a little different. Now I'm going to tilt the camera back to about 15-20 degrees. So this is now, it's a little bit brighter, just a different exposure setting, and this was the ambient shot. But you can see now that I'm capturing more of that feature up near the top, capturing that chandelier, capturing all that stuff up there, but the geometry looks like a fun house because I tilted the camera up, not using a tilt shift lens. Once again, if I had done it correctly, it would have been like this. And of course, to even out the exposure, so you can see kind of the comparison between the two. And this is with me pointing the camera up. So I've done a typical composite where I go in after now I'm doing my flash. I'm flashing one side, flash the other, excuse the middle-aged belly there sticking out. But that's the same thing that I would do for just about any other type of shot. So besides having the camera tilted back, everything was the same for now. But we're going to correct all this and preserve every bit of detail. So typical to what I do is I first shoot a repair layer, shoot a window pull, and then without getting into all those steps, I already have this open for you in Photoshop. Now, if you aren't familiar with those other steps to get to this point of the pre-processing and all that, there's a link up here, look in the top right, and you can go to that video, that tutorial, and that'll guide you through some of the steps. But just wanted to cut to the chase here on everything. So we can see that all the layers are loaded up here, and if I go to the very bottom one, there's me with the one side of the composite, here's me shooting the other side of the composite, and then I added just enough ambient in there, that flambient technique, added a window pull, and then my window pull repair layer. So that would basically be it if all the geometry was correct. Now if I tried to do just vertical adjustment, we'd have some problems. Let me go back to Lightroom and show you an example first. So let's say that I had, and we'll use the ambient shot for an example. If I just use the vertical adjustment in Lightroom, okay, the automatic vertical adjustment does go wonky and it leaves some stuff off to the side and it's not really correct. And of course we'd have to fill that in. That might work, I don't trust it. So let's shut that off. Use the manual vertical adjustment and you can see as we're correcting our verticals, those features in the top are starting to go away and we'd still have to crop this down because we have this extra space down here. So instead of doing all that, what we can do is back here after we're done with our flash ambient blending is I'm going to go to select all layers. You can just go select all layers from the menu up there if you want, make it quick. I'm going to do a Control J to duplicate all those layers and then I'm going to merge those layers. A lot of ways to do. You can right click over here for instance and say merge layers. Now I've got one layer, one image basically that I can edit. So let me just turn that on only. And by the way, I did that with just Alt and then clicking that little eye. Now here comes the fun part. We're going to crop this. So I'm grabbing my crop tool, but you want to crop first just way outside of here. So I'm cropping a whole bunch of extra area here that I can play with. Okay, and that's good. Just as long as you have this extra area, because now the next step, it'll start making sense. Now I want to take this layer and put this into Adobe Camera Raw. So you go up to the filter menu and select Camera Raw Filter. Now if you've never seen this before, this looks a lot like Lightroom because it uses the same engine. So we can use now the geometric tools that are in Lightroom here by going up here to the top left and clicking on this thing that's called the Transform tool. So we click in there and now you can see over here we've got our vertical, horizontal, all the adjustments for the geometry like we'd have in Lightroom. So now I'm going to go ahead and adjust those verticals and sure enough you can see the top is going upwards and of course that's where it was getting cropped in Lightroom. I'm going to take that vertical all the way up until I feel it's fine and it's vertical. Okay, now that's good and I can say okay. So you can see before the moving it up, it was like this, and now it's like that. And of course, with the crop before, then you can see how much higher that went. So we're now able to preserve all that top. Now let's go back to the crop tool and let's crop ourselves down. So crop down to the very top of that image. Okay, and Photoshop's really good at locking that in place. Bring up the bottom to the very bottom as well, just like that. Okay. Now at this point too, you can correct anything. I'm not actually exactly center, so if I wanted to, I can see where my little center point is. I could go ahead and start correcting some of that now. I've got plenty of pixels to play with, especially for the next step that I'm going to show you. Now what we want to do is grab the magic wand tool, so up here. Now a lot of times, and especially I'm using quick selection tool, so magic wand tool though, that's what you want, because you want to select this blank area around the edges. So select that, and there's a little bit you can see that was actually at the bottom here because I didn't crop it all. It makes it a little bit faster, by the way, to do this. And then you can go, I like to go to expand that, so select, modify, and I like to expand that by about 20 pixels. It really gets into the area to try to then do the next step, which is then to do a content aware fill. So if we go up to the edit menu, and then we go to content aware fill, we go to edit, fill, content aware fill, and then make sure on your fill that it is selected as content aware. Select OK, and then let that do some of its magic. Now this isn't going to be accurate all of the time, but it gets you fairly close as a starting point. So I'm deselecting that. Now over here you can see it didn't quite get it. So there's a little bit of something going on here. So just take the clone tool and take something from over here and then just clone that in. Okay. Done. Same thing over here for the wood beams. You can see it got really good on the top one going across here, but this bottom one is all hosed up. So I'll just do a clone once again. Just do with the clone tool, sample a spot here, go up, and then just paint some of that in to do it down here on the bottom too. On that bottom edge, and there, that's done. Get this little edge down here too so that that looks all normal, and there we've got it. So there we've got then a fully content aware filled area where we didn't then really have to lose any details from the picture by doing this tilt shift. Then we go ahead, we'd save it like normal, take it back to Lightroom, and when the final process is all finished, the final product looks like this. So you can see with just a few added steps in post-processing to do just that geometric distortion, cropping, and content-aware fill that we're able to preserve the entire area, get our verticals correct, and make it look like we used a tilt shift lens. Now, how far could you do that? To what extent? I tilted the camera back maybe about 20-30 degrees at the most. If you tried to really go up high, you might start getting a lot of distortion one way or the other. Now, something you can do though to still get your verticals fairly correct while doing that is getting your verticals correct at the bottom, and then you can do a distort tool on the very top to bring in some perspective and still do your content aware fill. Once again, if you used a tilt shift lens, you wouldn't have to worry about any of that, but there are some downsides to doing that as well, so this is a cheaper alternative. And once again, if you haven't seen how I did all those other steps prior to doing this, there are other videos online doing that, and of course I cover a lot of that within my real estate photography series as well. But I do hope that you did like this video, this tutorial, and that you can use some of this in your photography as well. If you did like this video, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. It won't cost anything, and as soon as one of these videos is posted, you'll be the first to know. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, take care, be safe, and get out there and shoot something.